I'm joined by my friend Anne-Laure Jackson. Hello, Anne.
Hi, great to see you.
We talk about sensory health. I know we sort of touch base on this every so often. Just remind us why, what sensory health is, and why does it matter?
It is a term that came to me back in 2016 because I was trying to find something. What is it about sensory processing and integration, which is the technical term for everything that I do and that I am? And what is it mainly does it get in the way of? So I was thinking of people who are anxious and they're clumsy and they're not content in themselves. So I kind of flipped it and thought, well, actually, I defined it as being calm, content, coordinated, and confident. So there is an assurance about who you are and how you are because you understand about how you process sensory information and how you know how it affects you, and that you're able to be in control of it. You're able to be in control of your body. You're able to be in control of your emotions. And there is a contentedness and a calmness that comes when all your senses are processing as well as they can, so that you are living in good sensory health. And that obviously impacts all areas of life.
Because I referenced sensory health the other day to somebody, and they said, "What's sensory health?" And they were sort of vaguely medical. Never heard of that phrase before. So I thought, is it like a global thing, or is it an Anne-Laure Jackson thing? Because to me, it just makes the most sense. We have physical health, we have mental health. Sensory health seems like such an obvious other something health that I was surprised this person hadn't heard of it.
I know, no, and I was so surprised back in 2016. It was the Friday night, or Saturday night actually, after we'd had Passover 2016, and I'd just joined a Jewish Messianic fellowship for an opportunity to be together, and and I thought it was one of those God things. That's where I thought I'm going to be a sensory health coach because I'd got into the whole sense of coaching. So that was coming through strongly, but I was trying to identify who I am and how I am. And it was that recognition. How come I'd never heard it before? Nobody was talking about sensory health. And I thought, that's mad. So it's like, right, okay, yep, I'll take that and I'll run with that. And that's why I am a sensory health coach. And I thought if there was ever a problem that I was a Christian occupational therapist or an occupational therapist speaking through the eyes and the mind and the heart of someone who's a Christian, I thought if that ever becomes a problem, then I can easily flip to being a pure sensory health coach if that was ever going to be a problem with my profession. Hopefully there is a lot more understanding and discrimination isn't quite what it was. And I don't think as Christians we're as shut down as perhaps we have been in the past. And it's like, well, actually, if you accept other opinions and freedom of speech, well, then surely we should be able to express that, knowing that we don't discriminate against anybody. We might have opinions on certain things. We might feel that God speaks about certain things a certain way, but that's just part and parcel of what the faith is. We're not intending to offend or discriminate or be nasty to anybody, because God's not nasty to anybody.
Very true. I thought it was just worth touching on, only because I just think, well, physical health, physiological health, mental health, financial health. We have all these health descriptors, but I just thought it was such an obvious one that it must be a global thing. But this person said, never heard of that. What's all that about? I'm going to have to find out more about that. So we'll go and look up Anne-Laure Jackson.
Yeah,
And
thank you. And it is weird to think, how do I say that, like, this is how I've defined, and like, I can't go back to anybody and say, oh, such and such. I'm thinking, well, do I just say Anne-Laure Jackson 2016? It's like define sensory health as, calm, content, coordinated, and confident. And then I thought, well, should I cut it down to three things? Because they often say, the three is the best. And I thought, well, actually, each of those elements gives a little something extra to what I think being in the best sensory health is all about. So if anybody has any other better descriptions, I'm more than happy to hear.
fine. Right. Now, I have had some questions in for Dr. Richard Scott, which I thought I'd put to you because he's going to respond from a physiological medical point of view. And I thought, oh, sensory health perspective. So here's one for you.
Okay.
This is all to do with mobile phones and a new word for me that someone sent in, nomophobia, which is the fear of or anxiety caused by not having a working phone. And then the question was about mental health issues, physical issues. And I thought, sensory health issues of nomophobia, mobile phones, and sensory healthy people. Anne-Laure Jackson, go.
Okay, thank you. So the fear of not having a mobile phone.
Nearby, basically, if you can't find it.
Okay, yeah. And then the sensory implications. Interesting. Obviously not direct, but will feed into the brain and the anxieties and everything big time. So there's nothing about, we don't use our phone to calm from our sense of touch, but the reassurance that the sense of touch gives us is something. And it's just like, oh, where have I put my, where is it? So there is that sense of a motor plan of expecting to be able to touch your phone and it's not there. So it is absolutely the loss of the sensory input rather than it giving you something that you are reacting to. So I know I'm often like those Western, because I keep my phones. I have two phones, one for work and one for home, and I keep them in my back pocket. So it's kind of like, howdy boy, I go and grab my phones because I never know quite which pocket I've put which phone in. So it's like, I have my own motor plan to go and get my phones. So and I'm always tapping my back pocket just to check and to see is my phone there or not there. So there is a sense of that tactile awareness of it all. And then you don't have it. And maybe it's the motor plan. Maybe if you enjoy fiddling with things and you don't have something to fiddle with, or you're used to scrolling and you don't get that visual. So it is all about the loss of something, the loss of, oh, I just need something to flick through, keep my eyes on something, or I'm missing having something to feed into my ears. I'm missing having something just to hold or to find around my body. I don't think, many of us actually probably miss chatting so much because we can just talk to a normal person or talk to the person next to us. But yeah, there's definitely a sensory experience about if you don't have your phone on you and the impact that it has. But it is absolutely, it is the loss of not having that sensory input rather than from what it, because it's obviously not giving you any sensory input. So you can't react against it. You're just missing it.
There you are. Mobile phones and nomophobia, which I think I might have got slightly wrong. It's the fear of not having a working phone, but I think that doesn't change what you just said. Next one, itching and scratching. Now, this was about itching your eyes. Okay, now I'm going to put that to Richard for physiological stuff. But in terms of itching and scratching, one of the things I've recently discovered is if you have an itch and you scratch the itch. Sorry if you're watching, you're not itching, my bad. But if you scratch the itch, you can actually release histamines. And we generally think of if you've got an itch or scratching, you would take antihistamines to counteract the histamines in the body. So then it creates more of a scratch. So your little scratch can actually generate further scratching by the very nature of scratching in the first place. How might a sensory healthy approach affect having an itch? Maybe it's a recurring itch that you can't control. I've just scratched my arm accidentally with a sharp nail. Now it actually itches really badly, which is point and purpose. I wasn't even trying to scratch it. How might sensory health help us in terms of I've got an itch, but if I scratch this now, I'm going to go mad because I'm not going to be able to slow down. And I guess there are certain parts of the body where that might be more likely, but how might sensory healthy approaches help that?
Yeah. That's a really important one as far as our senses are concerned, actually, because what we do to it can definitely impact how long it goes on for, how it leads into frustration or anxiety or anything else. A lot of our self-harmers, actually, when I work in mental health, will often they will use the skin. They will scratch, they will cut, they will bite. They will kind of like destroy their skin because the receptors, the information that it takes to the brain kind of replaces pain that is coming from elsewhere. And it gives the body something else to focus on away from something that it doesn't want to. So that is a slightly different take on that. But if you have the likes of an itch, there are different pathways. We know that there are the two tactile pathways, a discriminative pathway and a protective pathway. And so we would want to use the deep touch pressure. So if anybody does have an itch, it's you are definitely better to do more of the massage over it rather than trying to do the scratch, which is much more. It can go deep touch, but it's quite a light touch impact as well. So, but a much more circular rubbing over that area. Naturally, with some cream is likely to help too, but using the different senses that are taken. We have light touch taken through one tract, which is often where itch is stimulated, but we often use then the deep touch pressure and massage to try and calm an itch, calm that situation, or you cover it up when you try and distract yourself. So use your other senses and stomp your feet if your itch is on your feet, or if it's in your hands, go and do a bit of boxing, or go and wash some windows, or wash the car, so that your senses, your brain is overpowered by other sensations. If you know that that itch is only going to make things worse by the way that you normally itch it.
Sort of trickery.
Yeah.
Kinda. Or illusion, or
yeah, you're too. So you've either got you're tricking your brain into giving it other sensation, or you're giving it much better sensation in the tactile system. So you either use the tactile system in a better way to reduce an itch, or you just distract it and trick it and focus, get your brain to focus on something else instead.
Cool. There you are. I thought it was interesting just to have the sensory health perspective, because Richard obviously will come from a more medical, physiological side of it all. Right. Now, we've been working through a series for quite a while now, and I'm liking this a lot. I think you're as well, where we are looking at not just examples and case studies, and that's really interesting, but we've come at it from a different perspective, thinking about sensory healthy something. So we've had sensory healthy truck cab design and sensory healthy marriages, which I thought was quite good to do. Sensory healthy, all sorts of things. And I thought today, because this was nudged to me by one of the team here, sensory healthy cities.
Oh.
Now, we could spend 80 weeks on this, because there are a million ways we can go. But if they're suggesting sensory healthy cities, really you're talking about, I'm guessing really it's the hustle and bustle of being somewhere busy, like central London, central Birmingham, central Manchester. That really is about being in a city, as opposed to being in the suburbs, which isn't quite the same thing. So I'm going to go with that. Sensory healthy cities, and having been to London a little bit recently, one of the things that my older son said was that there's always somebody moving, that you can't look anywhere in London and find someone sat or stood. And we went through quite a bit of various places. And of course, you're going to get tourism, you get all that. They said, no one ever stops. No one's ever, there's like benches that are unused. He said, oh, can we find a bench? And I thought immediately, no, but it's not going to happen. And every bench basically on the mile up towards Buckingham Palace was empty. No one's sitting. We did. Because let's have a little rest. But people don't stop. It's the endless, relentless cycle of walking, getting on buses, getting off tube trains, walking into that place, going here. And it was relentless. And that was one of the things that he was quite surprised by, because although they grew up in around towns and cities, London centre, it is something else, especially when you go to Westminster, where we went for a little bit of a sightseeing in between meetings. But it was just fascinating, his comment that no one's ever stopping.
Yeah. I think that is what, if you look at city life, that has to be it's the busyness. It's the full on experience of everything, the sights, the sounds, the smells. There is nowhere that your eye is still. Your ears are always bombarded by things. There is always something going on, especially if you're outside, then you've got all of the tactile things, and you've got people who may be bumping into you all the time unexpectedly. So your senses are on alert the whole time, and it's not surprising that it is tiring for people who are in the city, or when they actually come out to the countryside, it's a very foreign environment to them, because they're not used to things being still or quieter or calmer, or the fact that they don't have somebody up right next to them. And it is a very, very different sensory experience living and having city life. And that's the importance of those green spaces. Massively, massively important from a sensory healthy perspective, because you don't get that anywhere. And I think then also inner city design of apartments and flats, I think has gone a lot more minimal because of the amount of stuff that is out there, and that homes are much more retreats, much more a retreat from the bombardment, the sensory overwhelm that is out there in our cities in particular.
There are some obvious things that you get used to quite quickly that nothing is ever going to have any impact on. For example, you go into London, it's hotter. There's lots of tall buildings, it traps the heat. We know that big cities like that, all the tarmac, all the concrete is going to retain heat better. So where we live in the northeast of the UK, it's a lot colder. We're much more impacted by changes of weather. Whereas in London, every time I go, the only thing I can see that's consistent is it's much hotter here. You go on the tube trains, that's always hot and very busy. So there are some things that you're never going to have any impact on. The tourism, of course, we saw, I don't know, 200 people queuing to have a photo at a phone box. Mm-hmm. All I could think was that walk a bit further, there'll be another one. It's like that they're not that weird, but that's what people do because they want to get that photo. So there are some of these things that are going to happen. Whether you want to go and look at Big Ben because it's big and it's Big Ben and it dongs, and we've seen it on the New Year's thing. So there are things that you're not going to change, but there are some things you can. And I know that when we walked up to Buckingham Palace from effectively Downing Street, because we went to have a look at that, so I could show Stephen here's Downing Street. We walked up the mile or so to Buckingham Palace, and it was just. It was calmer and it was quieter, but even then there was nobody really sitting or standing or looking. It was constant moving, or even if they did stop, it's for such a short time. It's as if they hadn't.
Mm-hmm. I remember going around. I always keep my my watch on to have a look at my step count, and it's just amazing. Just especially when everyone else is going, that you just want to too. But also when we go to cities, if you're not a city dweller, it is with a purpose, and actually you probably want to fit in as much as you do to see the sights, because that's what's so special about some places like London, that there are things that you actually do physically want to feast your eyes on, give yourself that sensory input of seeing something that you can associate with New Year, or you want to hear the sound and hear it for yourself when the bong goes. And it's just like, oh yeah, I was there. I remember being there once and it was like 12 o'clock and so you got like all 12 and it's just like, yes, just to be there to just hear. I mean, like it's a bell, it dongs 12 times, but there's something about the human psyche. There's something about who we are that just appreciates those things, or just thinks it's quite exciting or it's pleasurable, and funny things that we are.
It was, I mean, yeah, I've been to London a few times now, been on the tube a few times. We didn't get too lost this time because you learn patterns and ways. I think I've mentioned this before. When you're coming up the escalators, you don't ever go on the left-hand side unless you're walking. There's big signs, stay on the right. Why? Because if you don't stay on the right-hand side where you're standing, the people on the left are dashing up and down. To this day, I don't know why, because there's a tube every like 30 seconds. So what's the rush? But they want to get where they're going. And there is something quite, I don't want to say addictive, that's not quite the right word, but something quite intoxicating about being around that many different colors of skin, that many different accents and languages, that much hustle and bustle. There is something quite drawing. Okay, we talk about the big lights of London and all the rest of it, but there's something quite intoxicating about. I like being amongst people who are not all white men. I quite like seeing different, men and women and different colors of skin and different languages and dialects. I like that.
Yeah, and that's what all those different sensory experiences, it feeds into those arousal levels. And it's when we get peaked, when we're sitting quietly reading a book, where I call it level 1, and that's an appropriate thing, an appropriate arousal level for that task in hand, because you're quiet, you're snuggled up with a book or a magazine. Pure magazine would be just lovely, pure media magazine. And then, there is a typical way of being in that. But as soon as you move into a city, as soon as you start seeing sights that you might not be used to, the smells of the different spices, or, things that are different, all that sensation increases your neurological alertness so that it brightens you, it peaks you up. And that's where it becomes very quickly overwhelming for some people. So you can cope with it so much. And it is that excitement. It literally does excite your body. It excites your brain. All that extra sensory input puts it more on alert, which makes you more excitable in your own spirit, in your own sense. So that's where the extra, you feel more, you literally feel more because you're sensing more. And that for a lot of people is a lovely thing, and it adds to the whole excitement of going to visit or going into a city. But for those who are there permanently, that's when the eyes go down. When you're potentially at that, you can't stay at that level of alertness. Our bodies aren't designed to stay up at that level of alertness and stay well for any length of time. So for a day or two, or for moments, or for an hour, that's great. But day on day, week on week, there are the city dwellers who have to learn. They learn to cope in a different way, because you cannot cope with all of that sensory sensation, that sensory input, and what it does to your nervous system on a day-to-day basis, unless you are typically what we would class as a low registration, poor registration person. So actually lots of sensory input just feeds you and you feel on top of the world, all the time. But most people aren't. And so we learn. And as I say, you don't have that eye contact. You put your earbuds in so that you can control the auditory environment. If you're on the tube, if you're on the bus, if you're walking around, you just guard yourself, and you learn how to manage the sensory environment if you're a long-term city dweller.
A couple of things that I discovered was I got a blister. Actually, got 3 blisters, which was impressive, on 2 feet. I was so into what was going on, I would normally very, very quickly think, oh, that doesn't feel right. Pull my socks up, or tighten your shoes, or pull the stone out, whatever might be the source of the blister. I didn't realize until after I had 2 fairly severe ones, and a third one then came up, which was quite painful. I didn't really realize that until we were in a much calmer, quieter environment, walking up towards Buckingham Palace, when there's a bit of green. You've got the Wellington Barracks. There's nothing much going on there when we're walking past, so it's a lot calmer and quieter. That's when I really started to think, hang on, that hurts. That's not good.
Yes, that is the power of that trickery almost in the brain, where we're just saying what you can do when the brain has other things to focus on. It will just focus on other sensory input, and going into a place where all of a sudden it's like calmer. Your brain starts to recognize all the pain registration level that wasn't as high before. It is going to a place where now your brain registers with it, and it's just like, oh, actually, what has been going on with my feet? Or, oh, my muscles are tired now. Whereas ordinarily you wouldn't have. If you're in a group, you will do more. Armies, men together working on something, or in a football team or in a rugby team or something, you will go longer rather than if you're running on your own, because of that sense of group. But it's that sense of you've got other things to focus on, you've got other sensory inputs coming in, and it helps you go further, but not always in the best way, because sometimes you're not so conscious of your own body and what is happening to it. Brilliantly, if you are in an army and things need to happen, or if you really want your team to win, but you suffer for it afterwards. And yeah, it's an interesting dynamic as well, as to other people and how other people impact how well you process your own sensory input too.
So the other observation I made, we went from Buckingham Palace towards a tube station. I've forgotten the name. We walked through Mayfair. We wanted to get a drink, so we found a little supermarket to get some water. And it was quite nice. Stephen says, oh, I want to see some nice cars. Mayfair, there should be some posh cars. And we saw an Aston Martin. It was like, very nice. We saw a big posh Bentley, and it's like, oh, that's really cool. And then as you walk through more and more of these cars, you're thinking, it's another Aston Martin. Oh, look, a Rolls Royce. And all of a sudden, the excitement of, wow, it's a Bentley and a Rolls Royce becomes, it's just another one. It's not as big as that last one, was it? And it's funny how quickly we can go from, wow, isn't that a beautiful car, to, it's another one.
It's like that novelty factor. It just goes, and it doesn't hit the receptors in the same way. It doesn't have that same excitement as it did do before. And that's where we have to watch going into addiction there, or our thrill seekers. They're always after the next thing, because actually the threshold that they have met, they just want the next and the next and the next. So we need to learn to help those to come back down and make sure that their baseline stays low, stays at a typical a typical baseline. Otherwise, their baseline keeps moving up and up and up. And then they need more and more and more of something, which can be really unhealthy if they go and seek sensory input in the wrong places, whether that be drugs, alcohol, any other vices that we can think of will all feed into our senses. And so it's just like, okay, if there is a temptation there, let's bring our nervous systems down to baseline so that we can start processing things at a typical level, and not feed into that excitable addiction side of things.
Now, here's a little aside before I move on to something else. I saw an Aston Martin, very nice Aston Martin, and I thought, hey, we've got exactly that same setup. We've basically got an Aston Martin. That's what we drove to London in, because look, here's an Aston Martin. He's got a phone charging cable draped across his dashboard, going to something stuck on the inside windscreen for their phone. And I thought, we have exactly the same in both of those cars. So basically, I'm driving an Aston Martin these days. And what struck me was, I don't know how much one of these things costs. It's probably a few £100,000. I don't know. It's not cheap. They still have to have a mobile phone cable draped to a mobile phone holder stuck on a window. And for all the amazing technology of that vehicle, it's no different to everybody else's. It's just a bit more expensive.
Yeah, so always good that if there's any budding bonds out there who are just definitely not happy with life, just think on that. Yeah, still have to plug your mobile phone in the same way. Yeah.
Yes, and Aston Martins don't generally come with a mobile phone holder stuck to your windscreen for you, so you've got to buy one and stick it in yourself. Maybe you'll pay someone. But it struck me how what became so exciting suddenly became not exciting. And we saw, I don't know, stretched Bentley or something. It was like, wow, that's probably got a chauffeur-driven thing. And isn't that a nice car? And maybe if we'd only just seen that in the middle of Hull, it would be much more impressive. But in the middle of Mayfair, surrounded by a Porsche garage and Range Rovers and Aston Martins and very weird-looking posh Mercedes, it wasn't that exciting as I kind of anticipated it might be.
And that's where it's always good to bring us back to what is life actually about, and what is life for, and what are you striving for? What are you aiming for? Are you satisfied? Are you calm? Are you content? It's so much more than sensory health, but it's that general what is life here for, and what are the things really that we strive for, and that inner peace and that contentedness with life and who we are and how we are, and where we're living and how much money we have, because we might be able to afford an Aston Martin, and if you can, great, enjoy it. But if you feel as though that is going to bring you some sense of ongoing pleasure that actually is misplaced, then is it really worth striving for all of that and putting the stress and pressure on yourself to achieve something that actually isn't going to fulfill you in the way that you thought it might?
I do want to move on back to sensory healthy cities, but I've only ever owned one vehicle from new, and it was a petrol scooter, which I used to get to work when I was driving trucks. And it was great. I had it from brand new. And when I had it, of course, every single panel was perfect. It was pristine. It was in mint condition. It was brand new. And the first time I got a tiny little stone chip or scratch on it, I was mortified, thinking, now the whole thing's ruined. And this is why I would never want to have a brand new, really, really expensive car, because I was spending the whole time thinking, but what if I get a scratch? What if I get a paint chip? I wouldn't turn down hey, if you want to give me an Aston Martin, that's fine. But I wouldn't actually want one, because I'd be so stressed. I can feel the anxiety looking at these cars, thinking, what if someone just stumbles into that car? Normally it happens. It's not anybody's fault. No one's trying to be nasty. You can stumble, you can catch a wing mirror, you can drop your keys down the side of the car. It's scratched. I would be in such a gibbering wreck, thinking, oh, I've just lost 80% of my, deposit or whatever, because it's ruined.
Yeah.
Anyway, sensory healthy cities. So this is the other thing. We got hot because it was very warm. We ran out of water. I went past the very nice Mercedes and Bentley into Tesco supermarket. They're everywhere. And I got a bottle of water because we ran out of water. And what struck me was, no one's that different. Not really. Okay, the car might cost a bit more. Maybe they've got more money. Maybe they've just got more debt, which is a reality I learned about a long time ago. But actually, we all need water and we all need food. And that's okay, because you know what? We're still human. And therefore, those differences, they're not necessarily as different as we might think, even though the suit might be better or the dress might cost more or the car's a bit more expensive. But, we all have our sensory healthy needs. And one of those is water. It was a leveler. I'm not in awe of these cars, okay? I don't really care. They're just vehicles. I think they're great. And if you can get one, fantastic. But I don't really care like that because, hey, you know what? We all need water. And it's such a leveler to realize that this simple little see-through substance that we can drink out of a 30p glass that I've got, we need water. And that actually helps our sensory health far more than the sound of a V12 engine in an Aston Martin or the whooshing sound of an electric car because it's not got an engine. Yeah, we still all need water.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it such a lovely level? And that gratitude, that thankfulness of those basic things keeps us in such a place of gratitude. So that, say, for example, tonight I'm going out for a meal with my parents, my husband, and one son who happens to be around at the moment. And it's just like, what a lovely thing to be able to actually have the finance to be able to go out for a meal, to enjoy something different. Okay, it's not going out and buying a fast car, but it's a little something. And I think whatever, we all need to treat ourselves somehow, whether it be going to pick a flower in a field or go out for a meal or, buy yourself a nice car, whatever those things are. I think it is lovely when we can be thankful and celebrate life for the things that are meaningful, but with that element of actually, I could do without it. It wouldn't bother me whatsoever because I'm so thankful to be able to, we have air to breathe and we have relatively good health and we have food. Doesn't matter what kind of food, we are still living, we are still breathing, we are alive. And that's a very, not understated isn't quite the word. It's just like, who doesn't want to be alive? If you've got life and breath within you, let's make the most of the life that we've been given.
As we were coming near to where we live, which really is in the middle of nowhere, our neighbours are like a mile away in any direction. And I said to Stephen, okay, so you've been to London, you wanted to go, you've now been to the heart of London. We had a meeting, we've done some sightseeing, been to all the tourist traps in this little one part of a district. How do you feel now that you've been on a tube, we've been on a motorway, we've walked in central London, we've had the armoured convoy for Sir Keir Starmer drove past as we were stood at 10 Downing Street. You've seen all that today. How do you feel now you're getting home was kind of our conversation. And there's a particular part on our journey where we leave the last row of houses behind us and then it's just country lanes and it's gorgeous. And he said, after all the stuff of the day, it was really good fun. Loved it. I want to go back and see it again someday. But I really like where we live because this is home. And we've got a beautiful garden and we've got some amazing farmers' fields around us, which is gorgeous. And it's quiet. And it was amazing how much more the silence of our home became so much more powerful on the same day that we'd spent the morning in the middle of central London, getting on tube trains and all that. It was quiet and it's calm, but more than that, it's home.
Yeah, it's home. It's such a powerful word. I've got something in the front of my house, which it's basically talking about the difference from being a house to a home, and that's such a lovely word. And when we look at the sensory environment of what our home is and the way that we can control that environment to make it homely and make it feel like home, the place of safety, the place of security, the place of love, the place where we want to be, the place that we want to retreat to, and how we negotiate and how we choose the lights and the sounds and the smells and everything and the environment and the textures of the furniture and all those little things, all those tiny little choices which most of us are not even aware that we're making really, but we have done somewhere along the line, and probably due to the tactile nature of something or the color of the light or the softness of something. It's so much of that comes down to our sensory processing.
I think I would sum it up this way. Central London, good fun, quite intoxicating in a very good way. Seeing the sights and the sounds and all the rest of it. But you know what? You can't beat home. Not ever. It's like I say, it's the place when your senses are allowed to finally rest. I mean, it took us a while. We've been on a tube, we got in a car, we drove home, and there's lots of noise. And then all of a sudden it's calmer and quiet again. It's quite a reassuring sensation when that finally happens at the end.
Yeah. And it's like your brain knows also what home is because it has processed all of that stuff before. It's not new anymore. because unless you happen to go and buy a new dehumidifier or something, there may be new sounds, but most of it your brain has already processed. So it's already assimilated and associated this and that, and it doesn't have to process all of that stuff again. Whereas when you go somewhere new, you are processing so much on every single level, and it's quite exhausting for the brain. And then you come home and your brain can relax itself.
Cool. There you are. Sensory Healthy Cities and Andy B's trip to London. Maybe we'll revisit the cities a bit more without the London bit. But yeah, it was an interesting idea from the team that we could look at today.
Yeah.
If you want to connect with Anne-Laure Jackson at any point, you can do. You can send any questions on sensory health, including what is sensory health really. You can email us hello@pure247radio.org, hello@pure247radio.org, or you can just go to our website, pure247radio.org/ALJ for Anne-Laure Jackson. Thank you.
See you next time. Thanks.